if you're just getting into sailing, you might think that the softer, the calmer winds are better to start out. And that's not always the case. So I want to start off right off the bat by saying that for me, the ideal learning speed, the ideal wind speed for learning how to sail is anywhere between 5 to 12 knots. These are very easy, calm, like gentle breezes. And it's just a great way to get started, but it could actually hold you back if you only go after the really calm winds, and more on that later on. So I want to dive a bit deeper into understanding the entire spectrum, wind spectrum. So we're going to look at different wind speeds and what they will do to different situations and what you should go after for what you are trying to achieve. So there are 3 main questions, in my opinion, you should try and answer. The first one is, what am I training for and how do I want to train? The second one is, what type of boat do I have? What length boat, what type of rig, etc. And the third one is, what do I like? So as with anything, wind speed it's a preference. I'm a how do you call it? A fair weather sailor. So I really like the calm, the gentle breezes, and just go out there and have a good time. I'm not very competitive. I'm not racing with myself or against others or something like that. I really like to just relax on the water and just fiddle about a bit. So that's an important question to answer straight away. And that's what this channel is all about. So at Improved Sailing, we try to help you make your sailing dream actionable. So we give really practical tips and tricks and try to be helpful in a way that you can translate it and apply it to your, like, becoming the sailor you want to be, right? So the thing I want to do in this video is take a look at the entire wind spectrum, go over the different, like segment it up a bit and go over the different wind speeds and take a look at what that means for you. So first off, there's like a learning spectrum. So between 5 and 12 knots, as I said, I think this is great to just get started. Just get out there and try and work the sails and feel what it does for you. But it's not always best to go after the slowest or calmest winds. So it is actually better to train in conditions you suck in a way. So to get out of your comfort zone and be just a bit uncomfortable with the wind speed. But it's also important to stress that you should absolutely stay safe. And if you are unexperienced, don't go off and sail in 15 knots, 20 knots. Just start off slowly and make sure to really face it, like level it up slowly by putting a couple of reefs in your main or just sailing on the jib at first. So you could go out in a bit faster winds, but just make sure you don't over canvas, so don't have too much sail area up. Just start out with small sail surface and work your way up slowly. So that's a top tip for you right there. So the second thing I want to look at is what the boat type means for the wind speed. So obviously, if you have a bigger boat with better rigging, you are able to handle much stronger winds easier. And some people argue that you even need stronger winds for the bigger boats, which is obvious or which is logical, I think. So if you sail like a sunfish, like dinghies, you should probably stay under 15 knots. Anything over 15 knots, you are at risk of overpowering your boat and your rigging, and the chance of capsizing gets very big very soon. So if you're very adventurous, go try it out, but you should expect that your rigging is under a lot of stress and you will probably feel a bit uncomfortable doing that. So if you have a medium-sized sailboat, say up to 26 feet, you should probably aim for between 10 and 20 knots. So in the upper region, like 20 knots, it gets a bit more adventurous and the boat comes to life, you know. If you have a heavy boat like 26 feet and up, or a very heavy rig or an offshore cruiser or something, most experienced sailors argue that it doesn't really come to life under 12 knots. So you need a bit of wind. So you need like 15, 20, maybe 25 knots to really get up to speed and gain a bit momentum. So that's what the different boat types, how they compare to the different wind speeds. So if you want to go out and be a bit more adventurous, there's like the adventure spectrum, let's say. Waves are more important than wind speed. So you could really manage heavier winds if you have a bit bigger boat, as long as the winds are steady and they're not like gusts, and as long as the water is still a bit smooth. That's the most important thing. If it's not very choppy and the wind is steady, you can easily manage up to 25 knots, no problem. So that's something to look out for. Also, 26-foot boats, they tend to start heeling from 23 knots and up. So if you don't like that feeling, you should probably stay under 23 knots on average. So let's look now at the overall spectrum. So we've discussed the type of boat, the way in which you train, and it's also a matter of personal preference. If we add that all up into one like spectrum, one overview, what does that look like? Well, first off, I'd say if you're just starting out, you just want a comfortable learning experience, you should aim for between 5 and 12 knots. If you are an absolute beginner, try and stay under 10 knots, which reduces the risk of capsizing enormously, and you'll just stay safe very easy. For more serious training, aim for between 15 and 20 knots. This will put you at the edge of your seat, so to speak, and you'll start to be a bit more uncomfortable with the stress on the rig and feel it a bit more. So you'll have to work a little bit harder. And if you have a very heavy boat, like an offshore boat, 20 to 25 knots. Anything under 12 knots, people say, doesn't really work for them. 25 knots and up is considered pretty rough for any small sailboat. So if you have a sailboat under 26 feet, try and manage 26 knots. Be very careful. Reef down. Try it with just a jib, and work your way up slowly. Nice. Now you know what wind speeds to go after, but how do you recognize these wind speeds when you're out on the water? Well, it's pretty easy, and I'm gonna walk you through it in the next video, so click on the video on the screen to find out.